People are like characters in a movie. They've got all sorts of weirdness, all kinds of strangeness. They have their stories, they have their dramas. They are actors in a movie. So try and get outside of the sense of you're the most interesting person in the world, because you're not, and try and get inside the lives of other people on as deep a level as you can.
August 27th, which is transform yourself into a deep listener. And the way you end that law is the secret to this: finding other people endlessly fascinating. I feel so fortunate that this is my life. I get to interview people like Robert Greene, and because I find you endlessly fascinating, and I can ask you questions and get deep inside of who you are. And I think, but that doesn't work if you don't listen and try to, in my case, prepare. I think that's another thing to another prompt is going out into the world, finding people endlessly fascinating. Because if you really get into somebody's story, I mean, man, there are some amazing people, I promise anyone listening, right around you right now. If you actually ask questions, approach them with curiosity instead of judgment, learning about their upbringing, their life story, where they came from, what they did. You know what I mean? I feel like that's such a big part of this.
Yeah. What I tried to say in that, and I've said it in my last book, The Laws of Human Nature, is that we hear that a lot about being a better listener. But I don't think that really works when you tell people you've got to listen better, because there's something actually going on underneath that if you don't address what's going on underneath, no amount of preaching about being a better listener will ever work. And what is going on underneath is what you just mentioned, that we're more interested in ourselves than in other people. We're more interested in the thoughts in our head, with what people said earlier in the day, with what went on in our childhood, with events and experiences weeks before, than what is happening in the head of the other person. And if you find yourself more interesting than the other person, then you're never going to want to listen to them, because we're drawn toward things that are interesting. We're drawn towards pleasure. And if our pleasure comes from thinking about ourselves, it's going to be impossible to listen to people. So you need to turn that around, and you need to find people fascinating. That's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. I know for me it's easy because I'm a writer, and my first thought is, what's going on in their world, right? I want to get inside. I want to be them for a moment. I want to get outside of being me, miserable writer, working day in and day out in my stupid, boring office. I want to get into their world, because it's a release for me from all my tension, right? So I'm out at the supermarket, or I'm at CVS, and I see somebody that nobody in the world would ever give a second thought to, and I'm going, what is it like to be that person? And I started imagining their home, their childhood, their spouse, what it's like to work at CVS, in this kind of rundown neighborhood, etc. And I go through this process because it's fun and it's exciting. Sometimes I'll talk to them, and if I talk to them, I'll show through my body language that I'm interested, because that's the other thing is you can fake interest in people, and all of us know that kind of fake interest and that kind of fake question. But to actually encounter someone who is genuinely interested in your story, it shows up in their tone of voice, it shows up in their eyes, it shows up in their gestures. So you can't fake it. You need to be genuinely interested in people. Now, you're interested when you go to see a movie, you're able to get outside of yourself often, if it's a good movie, and get inside other people's character, because, Hannibal Lecter, he's kind of weird. I want to understand what's going on in his head, or Don Corleone, or whatever movie it is, right? Okay. Well, people are like that. People are like characters in a movie. They've got all sorts of weirdness, all kinds of strangeness. They have their stories. They have their dramas. They are actors in a movie. So try and get outside of the sense of you're the most interesting person in the world, because you're not, and try and get inside the lives of other people on as deep a level as you can.
How much can this be learned, Robert? This one, I think this is so important. This is a critical component to, I think, living a cool life. And it's certainly the people that I want to be around exhibit this. Like how much of this can be learned from if people are envisioning somebody in their head, and it might be you, by the way, somebody listening, but they're envisioning somebody who they're like, they have to be in my life because of whatever, whether it's family or work or, they're friend of a friend that is kind of more self-obsessed, and they turn every story back to, oh yeah, oh you did that, well I was doing, they did one of those things. Like,
Yeah.
what about for like that person? How what do you think about them changing in a way and evolving and growing?
It's pretty difficult.
Yeah,
It's pretty difficult with people who are that
there's also
self-absorbed, right?
there's also the self-awareness component to say, wait a second, is that me? Like, just holding the mirror up and asking, I feel like, and maybe obviously that's probably not happening with people who are more eye focused.
Well, the other problem is if you tell them you're too inward focused and you criticize them, it's going to make them even more insecure and even
Yeah,
more inner oriented.
yeah,
So we're animals that are attracted to things that are pleasurable, and we avoid things that are painful by nature, right?
mm-hmm.
So if we find it pleasurable to be engaging with people and to discovering that just in a single conversation, we're going to want more and more of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we find that we're more irritated and it's more painful to get outside of ourselves, no amount of preaching, no amount of learning will ever work.
Yeah.
So at some point, you have to realize, and I don't know how I can do that myself. If I could, I'd be a billionaire. You have to realize that my self-absorption is the source of my misery. It's the source of my not connecting to people. It's the source of my career running aground. It's the source of my relationships falling apart. Do I want to change that? Am I motivated to get out of that pattern, that habit? Do I actually want something different in my life? All right, well, maybe I should listen to what Robert and Ryan are saying here. Maybe I should try practicing it. And the practice has to go back to everything we've said before. It has to occur on a daily basis. It has to become a habit. So I tell people, the next time, pretend that you're a writer, for instance. Pretend that you're me. You go into your supermarket. You go into that horrible Thanksgiving dinner, which the very irritating uncle who drives you crazy, who keeps talking too much. And you go, I'm going to think of this differently. I'm going to think of Uncle Harry, who's so irritating and annoying and talks too much. I'm going to see him as a character in a movie. And I'm going to try and see, well, maybe something's going on in his life. Maybe he's got some problems, or maybe he has some tics. What is it like to be Uncle Harry, right? Instead of judging, you made a very good point before. It's our tendency to judge people that kind of makes it impossible to get inside them. I'm not going to judge him. I'm going to think about what goes on in his inner world. And suddenly that whole Thanksgiving dinner changes as you look at each of the characters at that meal in this sort of new light, or each of the people that you encounter in the supermarket or wherever you go. You start practicing on a daily basis and you see results. You see that it's fun, and you see that people respond to you differently. And when they respond to you differently, you respond to them differently. It's like magic. So, but you have to sort of experience it. No amount of preaching and talking is going to change you. You have to experience it from within.
Yeah. I think the prompts, at least for me, are helpful in thinking of approaching them with curiosity. The prompts is, did I leave them better than I found them? Just like,
that's very good.
Did I leave this place better than I found it? If there's a piece of trash on the ground, pick it up, throw it away, right? Did I leave this person better than I found them? And usually a way to do that, like you can judge that based on their body language, how they responded, how much they smiled, their eyes. All of that can show me, did I leave them better than I found them? And usually you'll leave them better than you found them if you approach them with curiosity. You ask some questions, you get into their story. I found that seems to help.